They never answer a straight question, do they?
Kathy, thank you. I'll play the role of Labour canvasser again in a moment or three, but let's go to other matters. And what's called the second lead, or the second most important story of the Daily Telegraph, is an intriguing one of an NHS hospital trust recruiting a nurse whose role is to support families where parents are close relatives. It's the Bradford Teaching Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust, advertising the position for, and I quote, close relative marriage neonatal nurse / midwife. The successful candidate would, quoting again, provide comprehensive care and support to families who have recently had a baby and are close relatives, cousins, uncles, aunts.
I should change my skin of wool.
Your uncle or your aunt? That has to be. Or other closely related family members. Oh, here we are. Sorry, then the text. It is illegal to marry your brother and sister in Britain. Weddings between cousins is allowed. But some folk marrying your aunt? The nurse will be tasked with ensuring the well-being of neonates, particularly in the context of genetic risks and health challenges. I don't know. It is thinking. Yes, I thought it was. You can't. I'm not sure my aunt would want to. My aunt would never want to marry me. I'm particularly fond of me. Ministers have faced mounting calls to ban cousin marriage. I used to get tension about it at Christmas. Ban cousin marriages in recent years. Richard Holden, who is a Conservative, introduced proposals to outlaw the practice back in 2024. The background in 3 inner-city Bradford wards, almost half, 86% of mothers in the Pakistani community were married to a first or second cousin. Right. Dominic Wilson is professor, consultant neonatologist and professor of medical ethics at the University of Oxford. What level of concern do you express at these marriages between cousins? Professor, good morning.
Good morning. So I think it's important to put things into context. So one of the things we know very well about marriages between people who are related is that it increases the risk of genetic illness. We all carry a risk of our children having congenital problems. If you marry your first cousin, that risk is double. But let's put it in context. So everybody has a 3% risk chance if they have when they get married, they have a child, that their child will have a congenital illness. There's
that's if I marry a complete stranger. That's at 3%.
Yes, if you marry a complete stranger,
Okay.
increases to 6% if you marry your first cousin.
Right.
But that does mean that 94% of those children are not affected by serious congenital illness. And the difference between the base rate and the rate in first cousins is 3%. So although it's increased, we need to put it into context. How should we respond to that? That's the important ethical question. And the question, the suggestion that's been made recently is that first cousin marriage should be banned. But there's several reasons why it seems like an overreaction or an inappropriate reaction. So one reason I've just pointed to is that the difference in risk is relatively small. You'd have to you'd have to stop 30 couples from marrying to prevent one extra child with a birth defect. Secondly, if we might think we're doing it for the sake of the children who are going to be born, but those children would not ever be born if we prevent cousins from being married. So there isn't any child who will be healthy who would otherwise have had a genetic illness.
A beast?
It's again a risk.
So the important thing to note is that when people have an increased risk of genetic illness, and there are people who have a much higher risk of first cousins, those are people who already have a child with a genetic illness. We don't say to them, you mustn't have any more children, or you must split up, you mustn't stay married. We say, we need to support those individuals. We need to give them information and support them in making decisions. And the same principle applies to those who are related, not just first cousins, but are related in lesser ways, and to help them to have information to make decisions. And that's what this suggestion is of a specialised nurse who can support these families.
I wonder if there's a degree of family pressure or coercion.
So one good concern about in relation to these marriages is whether the individuals are being coerced or pressured into marriage. And that's important to address, but in a sense that's completely separate from the question of cousin marriages, because people can be pressured into marriages between unrelated individuals who've been marriages that are arranged. So we have good reason to try and stop that, but banning first cousin marriage won't stop arranged marriage, or wouldn't stop coercion.
Grateful for your input. Thank you, Dominic Wilson, consultant neonatologist and professor of medical ethics at the University of Oxford. Now, the background is that cousin marriage in Pakistan is a deeply rooted tradition. Nearly 2/3 of marriages involving relatives, and this is to preserve family wealth, strengthen kinship ties, and maintain what's called cultural continuity. If you look around the world, if I take you to the United States, first cousin marriage, roughly half of the 50 states of the United States, roughly half do ban it, which means roughly half do not. What's the justification? Well, in December 2024, a controversial speech in Parliament by independent MP Iqbal Mohammed, he said,
the reason the practice is so common is that ordinary people see family intermarriage overall as something that is very positive.
Andrew in Barnsley on this. Andrew, your reaction. Good morning.
Hi, Nick.
Hello, sir.
When I was listening to that expert trying to minimise it, about 10 years ago, I've been in transport all my life, and I was delivering parcels in the Bradford area, door to door. And when we were doing the districts with the Pakistani people, we were delivering van loads of like nutrition from the NHS. The same as my mum had when she was at the end of the cancer, you know, to give them a bit of food and nourishment. It must have cost a fortune, and the quantities, Nick, were unbelievable. They were like half a pallet to one house.
And were you delivering to children, or who were the recipients, Andrew?
I presume it were kids, because when I went, the parents came to the door, and often, one lad had been put under his carport, and he was nearly full of them. It was as if he wasn't bothering to use it, as if the NHS were cheering him out to him, and he wasn't really, the kids weren't really that, they probably didn't like him or whatever.
And you do this every working day?
Yes, and in our depot, which was at Leeds, you could see these sort of Pakistani rounds, and it's all sent out on the floor of the warehouse, and the vans that were going to go there were like loads of this stuff from, you know, the big medical companies that supply like the factories and that. We must be talking billion.
But did anyone ever question why the heck are we doing this, or it was just practice and everyone did it?
Well, yeah, because we knew about cousin marriage. There were a young lad from Huddersfield, a nice young lad, Asian lad, and I worked with him, and he was married to his cousin. And sadly, they had about 8 miscarriages. She couldn't get pregnant. They were right upset. He kept getting him down. And I never said it to him, but I used to think to myself, I bet it's because it's your cousin, and she just can't carry it.
Right,
you know, I mean, it's not just the first time. You've got cousins marrying, you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, Andrew, and thanks for sharing your experience. Have a good weekend. That's the reality, literally out on the roads and in the area, because Andrew did it for a living. I've just been talking numbers with that senior medical clinician. Ruth says I'm a statistician. Yes, a first-generation first-cousin marriage is double the average rate, but what of second-generation cousin marriages and third generation? What is the compound rate of genetic illness? I think it is not just double, it will be a lot more than that. Someone here, Joe asked, what is the cost of it? Just been discussing this. What is the cost of all of this? Surely it needs to be banned. Well, we would be a bit of an outlier. You know, I don't think anywhere else in Europe, well, certainly in Western Europe anyway, does it, ban it, that is. About half of the United States does. We'll continue that conversation. Also coming up after the news. Jordan there. It's Elton John. Sorry, Sir Elton John will be in the High Court in that case against the Daily Mail. We'll have a legal look at it. It's 9:30. You're listening to Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrari on LBC.
Nick Ferrari at Breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
If anything shows the power and reach of LBC, this is the next conversation. Because no sooner did we put the phone down on that very experienced medical professor about the impact of first-time marriage in Bradford. So the phone goes, and we speak to Mo in Bradford, and I understand, if I've got this right, that you are for cousin marriage. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Well, it's you. What's the background? How common is it? How do you feel? Are you well?
Yes, I'm well. It is very common. I mean, the statistics that, it's upwards of 50% are about right. And unfortunately, it does increase the odds of genetic diseases. If you look at things like special schools in Bradford, people with Pakistani extraction are far overrepresented in places like that. And it's true, but
Roughly your age, you're in your 20s, 30s, what's the age?
I'm in my early 40s.
Early 40s, okay. Have you ever had a conversation with Mum and Dad about their thinking behind it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a deeply held belief. It's something that they've not known any different, and they feel quite strongly about it. I don't. I think it should really stop. I think it's
Mo, why do you think it should? By the way, I think you're right, by the way, but I'm just interested in why you think it should.
Because of the number, doubling somebody's risk of genetic illness, that's absolutely massive. Why would you want to take that risk? Your children are the most important thing in the world. Why would you want to put them at any more risk than they would otherwise have to be at?
What? Might I ask, are you married? Are you planning to get married?
I am, yeah. I've got 3 young boys. I am married to somebody from the Pakistani community. We're not cousins, and my boys are completely healthy.
Right.
But, the statistics don't lie.
Would you have ever considered marrying a cousin?
No.
Why?
Because, for the aforementioned reasons, because it's going to put, the products that are out of that marriage, those kids at risk. Why would you do it?
Can you help, if the United Kingdom is to go the same way as roughly half of the states of the United States and say, actually we're going to make this illegal, what would the reaction of the Pakistani community be?
Well, I think people would take it as an attack, wouldn't they? They would take it personally. Yeah, they would take it personally. It's a very sensitive subject. And obviously people have got kids that are poorly because of the decisions that they've made and having to own those decisions. I mean, can you imagine how hard that would be to actually admit, okay, well, I've either made a conscious decision to marry my cousin or sleepwalked into it because, the community or my parents have pressured me. Taking ownership of that decision, it would make them feel so guilty.
And lastly, when you talk with your parents or others and you express, look, I have to say that there's real concerns over this practice outside of our Pakistan. What's their reaction? Are they surprised? Are they angry? Do they reflect on it and think, oh, right, actually there might be a point? How do they respond to criticism?
It's a begrudging acceptance.
Really?
It's a bit, what happened has happened. I think the picture going forward will change because this whole institution hinges on a confluence of factors. So things like arranged marriage, the sort of historical and cultural kinship ties, but all of that is sort of dissolving because,
Well, it's
we're not in Pakistan anymore.
Because you must stay, obviously, to your Pakistani heritage, of course, but you are going to evolve probably more into a Western way of life, more generations born in Bradford. That's just a natural progression.
Exactly. But one last point that I want to make is that when a cousin gets married to a cousin, right, it takes those people out of the marriage pool. Okay, so when this happens, I think as an institution in places like Pakistan, there's very little people outside of that pool who get married freely to somebody other than their cousin. Do you see what I mean? It takes people out of that pool. So it's very easy for this institution to crumble when people start marrying outside of their cousins.
I've really enjoyed our conversation. Best wishes to your wife and to your family, and indeed not just your children, but the whole family. Mo in Bradford could appear our show, this is straight. I really appreciate that. We'll have more. A lot of people have wanted to go sell that, and you will in a moment. But I have mentioned this story on a number of occasions. What do you call Liz Hurley, Prince Harry, David Furnish, Sir Elton John? Well, they're all called to give evidence in this High Court trial against the publishers of the Daily Mail. The last of those, Sir Elton is due to appear today. let's turn to Ian Bloom, media law consultant, monitoring affairs in the High Court, was to give us an update. What might we hear? What will it turn on? Morning, Ian.
Good morning, Nick. Well, we are, as you say, nearing the end of hearing evidence from the 7 claimants in this case, and after Prince Harry himself, maybe Sir Elton John, later today, will be the highest profile of the other 6. The action has now actually been running for 2.5 weeks, and for some reason it seems to have slipped down the news agenda. Now, there must be other stories that are capturing the front pages. Nick, I can't